Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. It seems the word tsunami was a word that only crossword puzzle people knew, and occasionally trivia people would know that word. It could come trippingly off their tongue. Unfortunately, it is a word we all know right now. And this week on Consider This, we have some folks from the Heartland chapter of the American Red Cross. They've certainly been helping collect money to help people on the other side of the world. Judy Pescio is the executive director, and Mike Salmi is the director of emergency services. But we have this thing that never stops in our country, is that we have our own disasters. Let's talk, though, first what people are talking about, and that is the tsunami relief. I'm sure that everywhere you go, people ask you.
That's right, Carol. It's been a tremendous outpouring of response across the country. Locally, just to give you some idea, we have over $250,000 that has come through the doors. That does not count what people have done either online, through the national website, or the 1-800 number.
And that only represents sort of Omaha and around to southeast Nebraska.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a lot of money.
And keep in mind that the American Red Cross did not actively solicit contributions from the public. This was all in response. It was an outpouring from people's hearts in response to what we were seeing every day in newspapers and television screens across the country.
It's hard not to respond. We responded with people too, did we not?
Yes, we have. The American Red Cross has about 25 people that have been sent, and most of these people have expertise in areas like rebuilding water and sanitation systems. The whole relief operation is being driven and managed by the International Federation and Red Crescent Societies. And so the role that the American Red Cross plays is to support that effort however we can, and we rely upon that federation to tell us what they need. And most of it has been through cash. We've got $250 million that has come in pledges across the country through Red Cross. And that money will be used primarily for emergency food and water, rebuilding water, sanitation systems, which are, of course, all been wiped out in many countries, helping people just rebuild their lives, reconnecting families.
Did you want to chime in?
Well, the important thing I think to realize with the tsunami relief is that we're sending dollars over to that area, and it's much easier to send $1 to buy something in that region than it is to actually buy something here and try to transport it, which may take days or weeks and a lot of money to get there.
Yeah, there was talk about clothing drives and all this, and pretty early on that was sort of explained that it costs more oftentimes to get something over there. You know.
Exactly. So it's much easier to send that $1 than it is to send a bundle of clothing.
And this is such a massive, massive thing. Yes, we have the international organization, but you're dealing with countries that all operate a little differently, I suppose. And so, I mean, it must be just an extraordinarily intricate, shall I use that as a diplomatic word, situation?
It is intricate, it is complicated, it is challenging because of the cultural differences, because of political differences, because of different government regulations. And that's why most of the work through the Red Cross is being done by Red Cross organizations that are already there. As an example, there's the Indian Red Cross Society, there's a Sri Lanka Red Cross Society. And so they're better capable of getting the relief to where it needs, but we can provide the expertise.
One thing I wanted to, I guess this is an observation that just came to me because of what you said, is that we are, a lot of people are wary of giving to, I think people don't mind giving to UNICEF per se for the children, but they're a little wary of the UN. It is amazing that the International Red Cross, Red Crescent and all that we do have one international conduit that can talk and speak the same language, in a sense.
Yes, and you know, it's described by our president, Marty Evans, as the Red Cross is a conduit for people's passion to help others.
That's great.
That's true. Let's talk about here now. We have Since my husband's a retired firefighter, I mean, we really feel every time, because he's seen it all firsthand, every time someone, especially in the winter, we have those horrible house fires that are caused oftentimes by, you know, trying to keep warm, but it can be caused by just anything, old electrical work. And so you have this fortunately, we haven't had many fatalities recently, but people are literally wiped out, and the Red Cross is like the first line of defense.
Right, we're there to meet the immediate emergency needs of the family, so we're there literally when the fire trucks are still on scene. We'll have our volunteers there, and by the way, all of our workers that go to fires are volunteers, they're not paid staff, but they'll be there to counsel the family, provide emergency lodging if it's needed, direct financial assistance for clothing, groceries, medications that may have been lost, and even mental health counseling if that's needed.
Now, I know that those kinds of things, yes, much of it is done by volunteers, but it's still, the Red Cross still has to have a budget to fund the things that go into this, the preparation materials and things like that.
Exactly. It takes a lot of training for the volunteers to know how to do the cases. They have specialties. Some will be doing mass care, taking care of sheltering and feeding. Others will be doing casework. It takes time and training. Then we have to maintain the volunteer records, plus the vehicles, the gasoline, the supplies, all the other equipment. It does add up.
And actually, Carol, to put it in perspective, for us to administer to disaster victims, it's really about $1,900 per family every time we respond to one of those incidents. And so we appeal to the general public to raise money to help support that.
So we have things that come a little more intermittently, at least this winter, but we look across the country. You can look to Ohio and the flooding there. California, well, that whole southwestern corridor has had, in fact, there's even been some tornadoes. I worry about the Red Crosses there that have watched the money go through to the tsunami victims, who are certainly worthy of our help and consideration, and and the 4 hurricanes. I mean, it's a little scary, the number of dollars it takes to really take care of our people.
That's right. Actually, there is the large disasters in the United States are funded through the Disaster Relief Fund, and that works like a bank account. Mm-hmm. So, as an example, when Hallam had the tornado last spring
near Lincoln,
we could go in and immediately start providing relief, and know that there were funds available through that international response fund.
They were going to make good on it,
because
so to
a
speak.
Chapter, our size or Lincoln size, could not possibly fund an operation of that size. That was a $350 million or $350,000 operation. But at the same time, we have to raise funds to replenish that disaster relief fund.
It's incumbent on every chapter to help with that?
Yes. And so to give you some idea, we were able to we actively went out after donations to help support the hurricane relief effort.
What kind of response did you get?
We raised $70,000, and we worked hard at that. And now we're seeing this money roll in the door for tsunami, and we know that it's because people are so compassionate. But at the same time, to your point, you
were pulling teeth a little bit.
We were pulling teeth, yeah. We worry. Can we keep, how do we keep funding all of these disasters? There are 70,000 of them a year across the country.
And 9 out of 10 of the disasters are local, single-family or small multi-family disasters. That's the bulk of our disaster work, and a lot of people don't realize that.
And that's a disaster in microcosm, but it is just as painful and traumatic as, maybe not as the tsunami, because that's going to create this psyche problems in the whole country. It's very, very complicated emotionally and psychologically.
Right. Judy and I were talking on the way over here that really all disasters are local when it comes down to the household. Whether you lose your house to a fire, to a flood, or in a hurricane or a tsunami, the impact is on the family. And that's where we do our best work, is with the families.
I know from my experience with the Heartland chapter that you are very family oriented, even when you have activities to sort of bring the community into the loop. They're always very family oriented.
Well, at the time of, if you can imagine, actually I went on a fire call just a couple of weeks ago, and it happened to be the fire where the mother and her children were trapped in the basement and they were rescued by the police officers. Yes. And it's rather chaotic after the whole thing is over, because the firemen are there trying to do their work, and you've got police officers, and then the Red Cross gets there, and it's safe to say that the family is probably in a bit of state of shock. But just the people that have lost everything and can't go back into their house and stay for the night, they feel so helpless. And then it takes a number of days to start rebuilding your life. It impacts the time that they can be away from work. It impacts the families, the children getting to school. And in some cases where they have lost everything and there's no insurance, they're starting over from nothing.
There, oftentimes, not always, and I hate to make a statement that is too broad, but in our older housing stock in this city, I mean, a fire can be anywhere, but I think that proportionately in our older housing stock, where electrical might be very old, where furnaces don't work well, so you augment that with things. And so these are, not that it makes it any easier to lose a house even if you're fully insured to the hilt, but I've experienced seeing that.
We find a lot of the fires we respond to are preventable fires. They didn't have to happen in the first place. Wiring is definitely a big problem in the older parts of town. Some of the houses are 80 to 100 years old. The wiring is just as old, has never been upgraded. And people nowadays have more electronic things. They're playing space heaters, television sets, computers, all kinds of games.
Do you think so?
And it's a matter of physics. When you add that much load onto a circuit, it gets hot and something's going to catch fire. Space heaters have been a real problem the last couple of weeks with the really cold weather we've been having.
And then the cigarette lighters never go away.
Right.
The case
That's
that
right.
you pointed out.
That's right.
Exactly.
I mean,
Children
and
playing.
that will always happen, and it's almost a double devastation to a family, maybe to that child if they're old
That's
enough
right.
to.
That's one of what we call the 3 C's of preventable fires. We have children playing with matches is a big one. We see a lot of fires like that. Cooking accidents where people walk away from the stove, leave something on the burner, and it catches fire. And then candles. And candles are very preventable. Don't walk away from a lit candle and try not to put it near something that's going to burn or be knocked over by a pet or something like that. But if we could just take care of the 3 C's and wiring, half of our fires would go away.
We I think the American Red Cross is a little misunderstood in terms of its local work. We think blood, and the blood operation has been separated. It is still a bona fide American Red Cross blood donor processing center. But then the services part, what we think of as the American Red Cross is separate. That's the Heartland chapter. But I think we still don't really have any concept of all that you do. You work with companies, you work with individuals.
I think that's a very fair statement, and one that has been substantiated with some survey work that we've done recently. The chapter works very closely with the blood region, and yet we are 2 separate entities, and most of the separateness is driven because of FDA compliance.
Well, the medical
For the medical-
precautionary
exactly.
concerns.
But most people are pretty surprised to learn about the breadth of services that the chapter offers, particularly when we start talking about military. They might think of disaster in terms of big disasters like tornadoes, but when you boil it down to single-family fire, there's usually that, aha, I didn't know you did that. And then when we talk about the emergency communications for military families and the numbers of people that we serve with that program.
Let's talk about the military. I mean, we certainly, it's always been a support system, a communication system for the military and their families. I know that's broad. Flesh that out a little bit.
We do a lot of work with the military. The one that's most commonly known goes back to World War II, and that's providing emergency communication. So if there was a serious illness or a death in the family, or even a birth of a child, or imminent birth of a child, the Red Cross is a conduit to get the message from the family to the service member. And we
Now,
do,
isn't that a lot easier today with emails and whatnot, or does can it still be a sticky
a lot of
wicket?
it. One of the big functions we do in that regard, though, is we confirm to the military that indeed a crisis is occurring with a family that needs the service member's attention. So an email alone can't do that, but the Red Cross can validate to the commander who may be overseas or somewhere across the country that, yes, Airman Smith is needed back home now because his mother is imminently close to dying and we'd like to get him home.
Now that saves on work that the actual military back here has to do because they have their hands full, and we know they're a little even short-handed in some cases.
Correct, and we get several hundred calls like that every year, so it's quite a few come through. That's because we do have a large military population here in the Omaha area, not just Offutt Air Force Base, but all the Guard and Reserve units here in town and in the suburbs. We also do a lot of work in supporting the military families while the service members are deployed. So we'll be having events like we had the Happy Holidays event right after Thanksgiving in conjunction with OFIT, the Salvation Army, and other agencies to help families put together Christmas and holiday gift packages to be shipped over to their service members overseas. A lot of counseling, a lot of hand-holding with the families, a lot of work involved with the military.
Now, the military is very aware of what you do.
Yes.
I think,
yes.
but again, until I was even on the board here of the Heartland chapter, I really had no clue.
And you know, one of the other wonderful services that we have available now for military families, it's something called VidiConnect, where a family can come in and videotape a live message, a 2-minute message, and we have locations available, and then we can email that directly to the deployed military member anywhere in the world. And you know, around the holidays there were some wonderful, heartwarming stories that came back. I mean, sometimes that's the way a new father or mother sees their child or their new father sees their child for the first time. Wouldn't be a mother, but
No.
and I mean, it's just, we hear wonderful stories from families that were able to do that.
People forget too, because that part of history is sort of lived longer than a lot of us that are living here now, is that it has a congressional mandate in this country.
That's right.
We're reminded of that every once in a while, but I don't think the general population.
And actually, that could create some confusion, because oftentimes the Red Cross is viewed as a governmental agency because of that congressional charter, whereas we are not, and we are not government funded like a government agency. We are, to many people's surprise, the only non-government agency identified in the federal disaster response plan. And so the Red Cross is expected to be there after any type of major disaster to begin meeting people's immediate needs. And we work in conjunction with other agencies, but we work arm in arm with federal emergency management or state emergency management.
So when you talked about the savings account and used that analogy earlier, America has to keep its you all stocked up.
That's right.
In essence, do we
That's
not?
right.
Because no one's
Exactly.
going to come really to our aid, and
Yeah.
should something happen.
Yeah.
That's right. It's like a savings account or a checking account. We need to keep that balance up there because a big disaster like the Florida hurricanes drop that down to zero in a hurry. Then we have to replenish
Really,
it.
almost. I mean, it pretty much sucked
That was
it
a
all up.
$90 million relief operation.
I wonder if people experienced, you know, when we had 4 hurricanes in a row, and there wasn't a huge loss of life,
Right.
that people tend to think that there is not a lot of pain and suffering involved. Oh, you know, they'll get a hotel. Well, there's probably not one anywhere around that's open, and I don't make light of that. But I thought of that, and having never covered one, but had a mother that lived in Florida that used to talk about them incessantly, I sense that they're devastated for really long periods of time when it's so widespread.
Yeah.
Well, there's nowhere to go. You can evacuate to a shelter for a hurricane, but the effects of it covered the entire state literally. So it wasn't like going with a tornado here. If you can be 5 miles away, you're pretty safe. The effects are fairly isolated, but the entire state was affected. So people really had nowhere to go except to stay in their communities and hope that agencies like the Red Cross and other relief agencies and FEMA were going to be there to help them start down that road to recovery.
I have a friend who's an insurance adjuster that's always sent down to these places, and she said that they couldn't even get to write some, you know, to okay some of the original checks for quite a while. So there was a huge time gap for a lot of these people, was there not?
Well, because there were so many hurricanes that kept happening, I mean, even for Red Cross, they would get shelters set up, and then they would have to evacuate everyone because another hurricane was coming in. So it really slowed down the recovery process for all agencies and all organizations. And then you compound that with many of the people affected are elderly, many of them living on fixed incomes, many of them with dementia problems. And it made the...
So is the Red Cross around for a while then to help
The Red
some
Cross
of these
is
kinds of
still
people?
working in Florida. In fact, there were still shelters open
As
until
of early December, we had a shelter
Yeah.
still open up in the Panhandle.
That's unfathomable to me.
and that's the kind of information that people just never hear about, because you know, the media keeps things alive, and I think that's why tsunami is so, it's been in people's minds because there's been so much emphasis on it. If we think back to the hurricanes, the time of the hurricanes, we had the war going on and constant messages coming across media about the war. It was also an election year, so there was a lot of political discussion.
So there wasn't as much ink going there and much airtime.
Airtime, that's right.
And as any political advisor will tell you, that airtime is everything.
That's right.
And in the newspaper industry, ink. But really television, and to a lesser degree radio and newspapers have really, if they capture something and keep it, you know, in their top segment of news every night, that's what gets the response, be it political, be it disasters.
Correct.
So how do you, if you were pretty well, not wiped out, but your savings account went way down, have you been able to replenish it nationally with all this going, all this money being designated to go over there, and with good reason?
Yeah, I think, Kara, one of the things that the Red Cross is doing a better job of is telling the story, and our President Marty Evans is making regular calls to large corporate CEOs, telling the story that we don't, you know, we need more than just a one-time donation to this relief fund. We need to have a commitment that your organization will support the relief fund on an ongoing basis, so that we can ensure that there is a fund available. And we're doing the same thing at the local level. We will, when we sit down with people, and even some of the calls that are coming in now for tsunami, we try to help them understand that, you know, we really appreciate the fact that you want to support tsunami, but also keep in mind we'd like you to know that this is what we do locally. And we've seen, I think, more donations coming in where they're splitting the donation between maybe an international and local.
Is that maybe after your explanation?
Yes, yes.
You know, the other thing is the Red Cross is kind of a different agency in that it doesn't have a lot of overt fundraisers.
That's right.
I mean, you know what I mean? It's not, you know, the big splashy one every year, and then the several that sort of, you know, come every other month, because they basically go about their business, and people have been pretty good about supporting you, and corporations, but you've got to write a new chapter of this book.
Well, we kind of laugh about this internally, you know, when we talk about fundraisers, because we always say, well, you know, the Red Cross, we don't have any little dogs for doggy walks, and we don't have any children with big sad eyes. So
and that's true. That's the point I'm getting to, is that how you, I do notice that the news media is a lot better here locally than years ago, and I'm talking television because I pay a lot more attention to that. It's saying the Red Cross provided immediate housing and assistance for this family.
And I think it's part of the relationships that we build. We're really part of the community. We're part of the fabric of our community that
You're
holds
almost
it
so
together.
much of the fabric that we don't even notice that you're there.
Exactly. We kind of disappear in the background. So we try to educate folks that we're here, we provide a lot of different services, we're part of the community, and a donation of the Red Cross is really investing in the community, because we're going to help either a business or a family get that family worker back to the business quicker, because we're providing disaster relief. So if a corporation invests in the Red Cross with a donation, that could help them down the road as we get their workers more quickly back to work following a tornado or the next flood that comes down.
Now, I've noticed, I did a Google search in the news department of Google, they have a different search engine for news, that Red Cross chapters and other nonprofits as far away as Australia are concerned about the inability to handle their just regular number of disasters, because, and these are other social service agencies too, because of there is only so much disposable income for a lot of families, and they have given to where they felt the need was the most desperate, and that was generally to the tsunami aid. So are you concerned at all about, you know, people being sort of tapped out? I mean, we haven't totally recovered from the economy.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we're all a little concerned, and it's not just the Red Cross, it's other organizations, and we talk to other agencies that are a bit concerned as well. But the optimistic side of me says that in this instance with tsunami, we believe that people just tapped a little bit deeper because it was such an overwhelming, incredulous kind of disaster, and that people will still be there to support their favorite local charities.
You know, I also feel that there was a little bit of this, and we talked about it on the phone, of people saying, well, you know, they'll look at us now as a giving country. We're the richest country in the world, and people have not, some countries and people have not felt the best about us. You think there was a small element in all this of trying to show that we really are good? Believe us, we're good. You know, we do respond.
You know, I think it's possible. I mean, everyone has a different reason for being motivated to give.
Or a complex,
or a
multifaceted.
complex, yes. But I will tell you, I talked to a couple of groups that were doing group fundraisers, and their comment was, you know, we want to show the world that we are compassionate, that we're not mean, ugly Americans. So I think it's safe to say that there was some of that as well.
Now, has the Red Cross, now this is kind of a sticky wicket, after 9/11, there was a lot of unfair, bad feeling toward the Red Cross. Like, we gave blood and it wasn't used. Well, thank God. I mean, well, very many people died, but there weren't a lot of injuries of those that didn't, so we didn't need the blood. And blood does have a shelf life. And then there were some questions about where the money was going that people were pouring out. And I think that might have been a blip on the radar, but I think there was some kind of questioning about the Red Cross. The Red Cross always had such a great, stellar, untarnished, I mean, you're up there in a class of your own.
There was some fallout from that post 9/11, and I think that Red Cross recognized that we probably could have handled things a lot better than what we did, particularly messages to the public regarding how money would be used. And since then, the Red Cross has come out with a standard policy for donor-designated funds. And we make every effort to be very clear to the public that if you designate your money to be used for a certain area of relief, that's where it's going to go.
Of course, that was an unprecedented thing, and all kinds of new rules have been written in every facet of our life. Well, we have run out of time. That I can't control. Just like you can't control disasters. I want to thank you so much, Judy Pescio, Executive Director of the Heartland Chapter of the American Red Cross, and the Chapter's Director of Emergency Services, Mike Salmi. And thank you for joining us. And you can always donate online to the American Red Cross, and you can specify that your local chapter get the money if you care to do so. Thanks for joining us.
To view this edition of Consider This or past programs, visit our website at unotv.unomaha.edu. For comments or questions, call 402-554-2516 during regular business hours. Consider This is a production of UNO Television.